ask yourselves, what are you doing in this time of great challenge? What are you doing to unlock minds? Aaron, why do you do this? What's the philosophy of your life? What do you think life's all about?
I think the importance of life is to like yourself. If you don't like yourself, nothing means anything. To like yourself means you have to respect yourself. To respect yourself means you have to take actions that you respect if somebody else did them. And what's the point of living if you don't like who you are? You can have all the money in the world, and if you look in the mirror and you don't like what you see there, what's the point of it? So to me, the most important thing is that I like who I am, and that I take actions that I would respect if somebody else did them. That you live a life of character, honesty, truthfulness. And I believe that a person has the ability to mold their character like a sculptor can mold a piece of clay. You know, there's no saying that a leopard never changes its spots. I don't believe that. I believe people have the total ability to mold their character into what they choose to be in their life, what their ideals are. And that's what I try to do with my life. I am not the same person today I was as I was 30 years ago. I've changed a lot because I wanted to be something better than what I was before. And my philosophy is that you have to like yourself, you have to be a decent person with character and integrity and honor. And that's what's important.
Award-winning filmmaker turned freedom fighter, Aaron Russo was an amazing individual. You know, he'd been battling cancer for more than 3.5 years when he began making America Freedom to Fascism, that he shot, directed, edited pretty much on his own with just the help of a few people. An amazing individual. A long life of award-winning films, of hard work, and for standing up for the Bill of Rights and Constitution. You know, when we first went and shot this interview, I put it out on the web for free, but parts of it have never been seen. So here today, you're going to have a chance to see the in-depth interview, the final interview with Aaron Russo. But his important work lives on. You know, he made one of the definitive films exposing the elite that control this nation and the world, the private Federal Reserve. And the information he put out 2 years ago rings more true today than ever. And his film, America Freedom to Fascism and Mad as Hell and the other great works he did just continue like ripples in a pond to light bushfires in the minds of men and women everywhere. So this film is dedicated to the one, the only, Aaron Russo.
You rolling? I'm honored to be interviewed by Alex Jones, a truth seeker, fighting for justice in America.
Now he's charming me. He's getting me all smiling.
Here's what's happened. The Federal Reserve has created this massive inflation in America, which means that the American worker has to keep making more money to keep up with the cost of living. The more money they make to keep up with the cost of living, the less competitive they become in the world economy. So now what happens is we have to pay our workers so much to keep up with the cost of living, say, well, screw the American worker, let's go overseas now and get the cheap labor.
But really, that's a war being waged against the middle class.
Of course
the bankers print the money. Really, this is a war being waged against the middle class. The bankers print the money. Everything they're doing is about destroying any private pools of wealth or independence.
Yeah, but what I'm trying to say is, because of the inflation that they've created, they've now allowed other countries to outcompete us. You see, because other countries don't have to pay as much money as we have to pay here to our workers to survive.
Yes.
So now we're not competitive anymore. So we've lost our manufacturing base. We've lost our competitive. In the old days, the American worker, you wanted to buy everything American. You wouldn't buy anything from Japan, which was cheap crap.
And what does that leave us? It leaves America this military force, and so the elite's giving us a deal. We'll continue to build up your military and give you homeland security jobs, shift your economy over to being the bulldog enforcer of the New World Order.
Exactly.
You can either do, and by controlling the economy, they force everybody into that position.
That's exactly correct. That's exactly correct. And there's no more manufacturing here. We're a service economy. We do nothing. We provide nothing. We provide nothing to the rest of the world anymore. Well, first of all, Freedom to Fascism is a movie that everybody should see, because we show the fraud of the income tax. We show how judges put people in jail for no reason. We show the corruption of the justice system, and we show how the Federal Reserve came into being and how it's controlling society, and how all the
central banks of the world are working together through the Bank of International Settlements in Switzerland, which is the central bank for all the central banks, and how they all work together to create this one world government, the one world order, which is what they're trying to do. So Freedom of Fascism is a movie just to get you a good basic education about how the world is really working. And I really want everybody to see that movie. Critical. In terms of the CFR, in terms of compartmentalization, I mean, there are many good people, I believe, that are part of these organizations don't even understand what the organization's really about. People like when I was in Germany doing cancer treatment, there was a gentleman there who was visiting a friend of his who had cancer, and he was a member of the CFR, and we were talking, and I showed him the movie. He said, "Oh my God, I'm going to resign. I had no idea this was what the CFR was about." He had no idea. He was just a nice guy who thought he was in this prestigious organization.
Yeah, a lot of it's about getting good people, and so you can watch them. Keep your friends close, your enemies close.
Well, no, it wasn't even that. It was, a lot of people join the CFR because they think it's a prestigious organization. It'll help them in business, make good business contacts. They didn't have an understanding that the CFR is really about world domination, about how they and the Trilateral Commission, the Bilderbergers all work together, with the banks to control the people. A lot of them don't understand that. They don't see the big picture. Oh, it's CFR, it's a prestigious organization. I'll meet this one, I'll meet that one. I can do good business deals out of it. It's just business to them. The CFR wants to get the people in there that have influence and power, and so they're part of that. So they're not opposing them, It's like the whole country today is becoming the haves and have-nots. You're getting the very, very wealthy, the middle class is being destroyed, and you're getting the poor people.
Isn't this just a slick mafia that took over and uses fancy PR?
Well, you can call it mafia, you call it whatever you want, but it's definitely a criminal organization. There's no question about it. But it's a criminal organization that has prestige, that appears to have what's the word I'm looking for? Class style. It's like, respected. It's respected. People don't look at it as being a criminal organization. That's what a great job they've done.
How could there be a war on terror and actually say that we're having a war against terrorism and leave the borders wide open? If you were the President of the United States, or I were the President of the United States, and 9/11 really happened the way they want us to believe it happened, the first thing you would do is shut down the borders so people couldn't get in the country to harm you. But they left the borders wide open because the bankers want the borders open because they want a one-world government. They want a North American Union. They don't want borders here. The 9/11 was only a manifestation. It was done to create a fear in the American public, right? So that we will obey what they want us to do. And take Richard Reed, the shoe bomber. Here's a guy who was 6'6", ugly as could be. I heard he smelled. Okay, he sits in coach on a plane, lighting matches to put his shoe on fire, surrounded by people. It's idiotic. If you were going to blow up a plane, you go into the bathroom, you close the door, and you put your shoe on fire. You're not going to sit there surrounded by people lighting matches on a no-smoking flight. They want you to believe this nonsense. It's ridiculous.
7/7's come out now, and the majority of the British people think it's an inside job, and all the evidence points towards it being an inside job.
Yeah, I mean what happened in England, London?
Yes.
All this is nonsense. It's just keep people in fear. It's this endless war on terrorism that doesn't really exist, so people will submit to whatever the government wants them to submit to. Searches, check your shoes, have ID cards, put chips in you, where you become servants to the elite. That's what this is all about, Restore America's republic to what it's supposed to be, get the bankers out of our government, get the bankers out of our government. Government should stop borrowing money from the banks. Government should make its own money, restore the republic, individual freedoms. That's what this country's about. And until we do that, we're gonna be slaves.
And Iraq was using, Saddam wanted to start using euros instead of dollars, right?
He was messing up their whole consumption.
Iran wants to start using euros instead of dollars.
They have.
Okay? So I'm saying what they're trying to do is preserve their power. And one lie leads to the next lie, leads to the next lie. And until you get to the root cause of 9/11, which is supposedly the war on terror, we'll never solve our problems here. Should we send more troops into Iraq? Should we not send more troops into Iraq? Well, the truth is, the fact is, that it all goes back to this war on terror. Where did 9/11 come from? That's the root cause of everything. And until we have a full investigation, find out why Building 7 fell down, why they shipped all the steel out of America so quickly, from the buildings, why all the things that don't make any sense about 9/11, until we find out why it really happened, we'll never understand why there's a war on terror. And we'll never be able to prove that the war on terror is a phony. Nick and I discussed many things. One of the things we discussed, or he brought up in conversation, was reducing world population, and felt that there were too many people in the world. In a way, I agree. There are too many people in the world, but I don't think I have the authority to say who's going to die and who's not going to die, But they felt that they wanted to reduce world population, and he felt that it should be reduced by half. He even mentioned to me once they were having a real problem trying to solve the Israel-Palestinian problem. And he talked to me once about they were playing with the idea of bringing Israel to Arizona, and taking all the people from Israel and giving everybody $1 million and setting up Israel in the state of Arizona.
Unbelievable.
Just to end that problem, because that's a problem that they're not in charge of, in a sense. They're not controlling that problem. They're very arrogant. They can do whatever they want to do. We've given these people the authority to create money out of thin air, and through that device, they control everything. And if you want to win the battle to stop that, you have to deny them the ability to create money. It's only because they can make money that they have all this power.
They literally have the money machines.
They have the money machines. They can print it. They can do whatever they want to do. They own everything.
Aaron, we take over pretty quick. If we were the guys that issued the money, everybody had to come give us real assets for the use of this money we just printed up.
People. I tell people, why in the world does the American government borrow money from the banks when they have the ability to create it themselves without borrowing it and paying interest on it? Why? And nobody can answer that question. Not one politician ever raises that. Why does the American government borrow money when they can create it without paying interest?
Well, we did create it up until
1913. And so people say, well, because if the American government does it, it'll create inflation. That's the answer. I say, well, let's look at it. The American government has the Federal Reserve do it, which creates the same inflation as if they did it. But also with the inflation, now you're getting massive debt. So with the Federal Reserve, you have inflation and debt. Now, if the American government made the money, backed by gold, which limited the amount they could make, you wouldn't have debt and you wouldn't have inflation.
But inflation was only about 50% from the 1780s, I've looked it up, until the late 1800s. And then we have the central banks already trying to cause some panics, which they then used to push the Federal Reserve. And if we look at inflation since 1913 into 2007, it's exponential. In fact, a dollar is worth about 2 pennies what it was worth in 1913. Federal Reserve Chairman, former Federal Reserve Chairman Alan Greenspan, doubled the money supply from 2000 to 2006. And then Edward Bernanke, the new Fed chief, came in and said he's going to double it again in the next 2 years. And then he said, now I'm going to make the money supply numbers secret. And so now we don't even know. Right. But the evidence is they are just, in the curve of inflation, it gradually grows. And then suddenly at a point, it goes straight up. And it seems
it's parabolic, yeah.
Parabolic.
But the thing is that the only thing I disagree with you on from early 1800 to 1913, there was no inflation other than during the Civil War. When Lincoln was
well, I'm talking about how much a dollar was worth. And I know
never changed. There was no inflation. In that whole 100 years, there was no inflation. People knew what the money was worth. They could retire. They knew what it would cost them to live their lives out. There was no problem. It was only since 1913 when the Fed came in that we've created massive inflation and massive debt.